Hi, friends. Welcome to yet another video in which we are looking into AIA B101. This time we're going to be looking into Article 5, Owner's Responsibilities. If you flip around, you will see that it's not a very long one. So we're also in this video going to look at the Article 6, cost of the work, which is another short one. And then also Article 7, copyrights and licenses. We're just going to group those three together. So here we go. Article 5, owner's responsibilities. 5.1. Unless otherwise provided for under this agreement, the owner shall provide information in a timely manner regarding requirements for and limitations on the project, including a written program, which shall set forth the owner's objectives, schedule, constraints, and criteria, including space requirements and relationships, flexibility, expandability, special equipment systems, and site requirements. It pretty much says that whatever homework the owner needs to do, and it's listed here, it should be done in a timely manner. 5.2, the owner shall establish the owner's budget for the project, including 1, the budget for the cost of the work, as defined in section 6.1, 2, the owner's other cost, and 3, reasonable contingencies related to all of these costs. The owner shall update the owner's budget for the project as necessary throughout the duration of the project until final completion. If the owner significantly increases or decreases the owner's budget for the cost of the work, the owner shall notify the architect. The owner and architect shall thereafter agree to a corresponding change in the project scope and quality. So this paragraph acknowledges that changes can happen because the owner can raise an unexpected amount of money to help finance the project. But at the same time, uh, uh, the owner may not get the amount of money that they were counting on. So things can happen, but then it's their job to be on top of their finances and to update, uh, to, to share the updates with the architects and then agree with the architects on how the project scope and quality are going to change. 5.3, the owner shall identify a representative authorized to act on the owner's behalf with respect to the project. The owner shall render decisions and approve the architect's submittals in a timely manner in order to avoid unreasonable delay in the orderly and sequential progress of the architect's services. So the owner, make up your mind on time, and whenever architects ask you something, please provide your answer in a timely manner. And yeah, that's that. 5.4, the owner shall furnish surveys to describe physical characteristics, legal limitations, and utility locations for the site of the project, and a written legal description of the site. The surveys and legal information shall include, as applicable, grades and lines of streets, alleys, pavements, and adjoining property and structures, designated wetlands, adjacent drainage, rights of way, restrictions, easements, encroachments, zoning, deed restrictions, boundaries, and contours of the site, locations, dimensions, and other necessary data with respect to existing buildings, other improvements in trees, and information concerning available utility services and lines, both public and private, above and below grade, including inverts and depths. All the information on the survey shall be referenced to a project benchmark. So this this paragraph pretty much lists everything that the owner needs to deliver, and all these things, the architect and their accuracy are not architect's responsibility. 5.5. The owner shall furnish services of geotechnical engineers, which may include test borings, test pits, determinations of soil-bearing values, percolation tests, evaluation of hazardous materials, seismic evaluation, ground corrosion tests, and resistivity tests, including necessary operations for anticipating subsoil conditions with written reports and appropriate recommendations. So in this paragraph, essentially everything that a geotechnical engineer would provide. And again, just like we saw in the initial information in Article 1, where we identified who this geotechnical engineer is, here again, they're saying that geotechnical is the owner's responsibility, and these are all the things that they need to deliver. 5.6. The owner shall provide the supplemental services designated as the owner's responsibility in section 4.1.1. 5.7. If the owner identified a sustainable objective in Article 1, the owner shall fulfill its responsibilities as required in AIA document E204, Sustainable Projects Exhibit attached to this agreement. I recommend look at this exhibit and review it and make sure, again, you understand what information you need to put in and why. 5.8, the owner shall coordinate the services of its own consultants with those services provided by the architect. Super duper important. Because if as we saw earlier, if owner throws this task into the architect's court, it's a supplemental service. Upon the architect's request, the owner shall furnish copies of the scope of services and the contracts between the owner and the owner's consultants. The owner shall furnish the services of consultants other than those designated as the responsibility of the architect in this agreement, or authorize the architect to furnish them as an additional service. When the architect requests such services and demonstrates that they are reasonably required by the scope of the project, the owner shall require that its consultants and contractors maintain insurance, including professional liability insurance, as appropriate to the services or work provided. So making sure, if you think about it, owner needs to make sure that everyone who they are paying have insurances, like professional liability insurances, which makes sense. 5.9, the owner shall furnish tests, inspections, and reports required by law or the contract documents, such as structural, mechanical, and chemical tests, tests for air and water pollution, and tests for hazardous materials. So this is very applicable if you have a brownfield, and brownfields are areas that used to have some kind of like industrial factory, or some industry was going on there, or mining, or I don't know, something like that, and something that would contaminate either soil or air or water, and then it's owner's job to get to the bottom of that and figure out what the levels are, how bad it is, and pay for the people who actually do the tests. Okay. 5.10, the owner shall furnish all legal, insurance, and accounting services, including auditing services, that may be reasonably necessary at any time for the project to meet the owner's needs and interests. Pretty straightforward. 5.11, the owner shall provide prompt written notice to the architect if the owner becomes aware of any fault or defect in the project, including errors, omissions, and inconsistencies in the architect's instruments of service. So yeah, architect and owner should kind of like, it's not their responsibility to be checking each other's work, but if there is something obviously wrong that you were not looking for, but you saw it, then you have to let the other person know. 512, the owner shall include the architect in all communications with the contractor that relate to or affect the architect's services or professional responsibilities. The owner shall promptly notify the architect of the substance of any direct communications between the owner and the contractor otherwise relating to the project. Communications by and with the architect's consultants shall be through the architect. This is again another very important paragraph that defines channels of communication. So if you imagine the triangle of owner, architect, contractor, owner has to keep architect in the loop when they're talking to the contractor. And then if the architect or if the owner wants to talk to the architect's consultants, it needs to go through the architect. And by the similar token, if the owner or architect want to talk to subcontractors of the contractor, that needs to go through the contractor. So yeah, it's pretty important to have a very solid understanding of these channels of communication and how, but I mean, generally the rule is uh, keep everyone in the loop and be respectful of the hierarchy of that were set up by all these agreements. Because yeah, you don't want to, ideally you don't want to jump too much, if that makes sense. Okay. 513. Before executing the contract for construction, the owner shall coordinate the architect's duties and responsibilities set forth in the contract for construction with the architect's services set forth in this agreement. The owner shall provide the architect a copy of the executed agreement between the owner and contractor, including the general conditions of the contract for construction. This is an interesting one, but it's kind of, it stays true to what we just read in 512, which kind of says that the architect will see the agreement that the owner has with the contractor. And if you review A101, which is the agreement between owner and the contractor, um, you will see a lot of similarities with this, but you can also see how much the contractor is paid, their fee and all that. But ultimately, you are going to be in charge of pacing and making sure of pacing those payments and making sure that 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 the contractor actually did the work that they claim that they did. So again, it's all about like keeping each other in the loop. 5.14, the owner shall provide the architect access to the project site prior to commencement of the work and shall obligate the contractor to provide the architect access to the work wherever it is in preparation or progress. So yeah, architect needs to be familiar with the site, and pretty much architect can walk onto the site, onto the construction site to see the work wherever it is in preparation or progress. 5.15, within 15 days after receipt of a written request from the architect, the owner shall furnish the requested information as necessary and relevant to the architect to evaluate, give notice of, or enforce lien rights. So this says that, yeah, the owner has 15 days to respond to a written request from the architect to when the architect asks to evaluate or give notice, when the architect gives notice of or talks about something that would enforce lien rights. So yeah, that concludes Article 5. As you can see, it's not very long, but it establishes a couple of important things. It establishes how the structure of these relationships and how everyone should keep each other in the loop and not go beyond, not kind of like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you don't want to jump each other and jump over levels that in order to get your point across to somebody. So don't talk to a subcontractor without talking to contractor. Okay, so we can move to Article 6, cost of the work. Again, it's a short one, less than a page, so let's get to it. 6.1, for purposes of this agreement, the cost of the work shall be the total cost to the owner to construct all elements of the project, designed or specified by the architect, and shall include contractor's general conditions cost, overhead, and profit. Like, highlight this, like, it's really important. The cost of the work also includes the reasonable value of labor, materials, and equipment donated to or otherwise furnished by the owner. So this, when they say donated to or otherwise furnished by the owner, I mean, you could have, let's say, a church, or yeah, let's say you have a church that is either raising money or they are renovating a mini chapel or something, and then they receive some materials from an individual. Now, even though the church got that, parish got that for free, um, the cost of that material is still included into the cost of the work. The cost of the work does not include the compensation of the architect, the cost of the land, rights of way, financing, or contingencies for changes in the work, or other costs that are the responsibility of the owner. So it's really important to know what goes into the cost of the work and what does not go into the cost of work. 6.2. The owner's budget for the cost of the work is provided in initial information. We saw that. And shall be adjusted throughout the project as required under section 5.2, 6.4, and 6.5. Evaluations of the owner's budget for the cost of the work and the preliminary estimate of the cost of the work and updated estimates of the cost of the work prepared by the architect. And we saw that after every phase, you need to update this. Represent the architect's judgment as a design professional. It is recognized, however, that neither the architect nor the owner has control over the cost of labor, materials, or equipment. The contractor's methods of determining bid prices for competitive bidding, market, or negotiating conditions. Accordingly, the architect cannot and does not warrant or represent that bids or negotiated prices will not vary from the owner's budget for the cost of the work, or from any estimate of the cost of the work or evaluation prepared or agreed by the architect. So this paragraph says that even though the architect does these cost estimates and updates them and owner checks them, neither owner or the architect are professionals at these cost estimates. So, and there is no way they can anticipate some of these fluctuations that happen in the cost of labor, materials, or equipment, or any other factor. 6.3. In preparing estimates of the cost of work, the architect shall be permitted to include contingencies for design, bidding, and price escalation to determine what materials, equipment, component systems, and types of construction are to be included in the contract documents, to recommend reasonable adjustments in the program and scope of the project, and to include design alternates as may be necessary to adjust the estimated cost of the work to meet the owner's budget. The architect's estimate of the cost of the work shall be based on current area, volume, or similar conceptual estimating techniques. If the owner requires a detailed estimate of the cost of the work, the architect shall provide such an estimate if identified as the architect's responsibility in section 4.1.1 as a supplemental service. Contingency is a word that stands out here in the first sentence, and it says the architect shall be permitted to include contingencies for design. And when they say this, they acknowledge that the architect, as stated in the paragraph before, cannot be held responsible for a super duper accurate cost estimates. So these contingencies are there to provide a buffer, and they are essentially there as a certain amount of money or a percentage of the total that are there to address expenses that cannot be specifically defined at the time. So by that, we can set an example of, like, let's say the architect is calculating how much excavation is going to cost. And they say, because, like, let's say the architect received a geotechnical report that said this and this and this, and the architect thinks that, oh, this much material is going to be, this much soil is going to be excavated, and this is the price per square foot or square yard that we're going to excavate, and we are going to calculate, we're going to multiply the price per unit price per with the number of units, and then we're going to get some number. And then let's say we get, I don't know, I'm just guessing now, $100,000 for excavation. But then the architect is going to go, okay, I have 100,000 there, but I don't know if that's really going to be the unit price at the time, at the moment when we actually do the work. Or I don't know if, what if we actually need to do, what if we need to excavate more than we planned? So let me add another 20,000 to that. So that 20,000 is contingency. So it kind of, it's this amount of money that we don't know if we're gonna need, but it's there, we are planning for it, so that if we need it, it is there. So there's that. Okay, 6.4. If through no fault of the architect, the procurement phase has not commenced within 90 days after the architect submits the construction documents to the owner's budget for the cost of the work shall be adjusted to reflect changes in the general level of prices in the applicable construction market. Really, really important paragraph, this one. So you, as an architect, you submit your CD package with everything you need to do. And then, so 90 days from your CD submittal, from your CD deadline, either negotiated proposal negotiations or bidding need to happen. If if they don't happen, then the cost of the work shall be adjusted to reflect changes in the general level of prices in the applicable construction market. So, I mean, this sort of says that within 3 months, 90 days, things can change on the market. Okay, 6.5. If at any time the architect's estimate of the cost of the work exceeds the owner's budget for the cost of the work, the architect shall make appropriate recommendations to the owner to adjust the project size, quality, or budget for the cost of the work, and the owner shall cooperate with the architect in making such adjustments. Now, this is another one of those fluffy articles, because somebody could argue, well, it's architect's job to deliver a project on budget. And then here we have a situation in which we have an architect that is submitting an estimate that is higher than the owner's budget. So what do you do? Then the owner is going to say, the owner can say, well, I guess I can raise another $1 million or something like that. But the owner can also say, no, this is not negotiable. I cannot raise more money. This is what I have. It is what it is. And then it says, architect shall make appropriate recommendations to the owner to make these adjustments, and the owner shall cooperate with the architect in making such adjustments. So yeah, it's a little biased towards the architect here, because it sort of forces the owner. It doesn't really give the owner ability to say, no, this is not what I asked for. I want something that's within my budget, and you just have to deliver that. So it kind of gives the owner extra work too. Okay, let's see what happens next. 6.6. If the owner's budget for the cost of the work at the conclusion of the construction documents phase services is exceeded by the lowest bona fide, and we talked about this, bid or negotiated proposal, the owner shall, another one of the really important paragraphs in this agreement. So the owner shall, point 1, give written approval of an increase of the budget for the cost of the work. And that's a really good case scenario. Point 2, authorize rebidding or renegotiating of the project within a reasonable time. So just going over again. Point 3, terminate in accordance with section 9.5. So just kind of like cancel everything or shelf project for 2 years or whatever. Point 4, in consultation with the architect, revise the project program scope or quality as required to reduce the cost of the work. Or point 5, implement any other mutually acceptable alternative. So this paragraph lists actions that the owner can take if the lowest bona fide bid exceeds the owner's budget. And now we're coming to a very interesting and extremely, extremely important paragraph. That's 6.7. It says, if the owner chooses to proceed under section 6.6.4, and I will remind you what this is. It says, in consultation with the architect, revise the project program scope or quality as required to reduce the cost of work. So if the owner chooses to do that, The architect shall modify the construction documents as necessary to comply with the owner's budget for the cost of the work at the conclusion of the construction documents phase services, or the budget as adjusted under section 6.6.1. If the owner requires the architect to modify the construction documents because the lowest bona fide bid or negotiated proposal exceeds the owner's budget for the cost of the work due to market conditions, the architect could not reasonably anticipate, the owner shall compensate the architect for the modifications as an additional service pursuant to section 11.3. So this is a change that happened between 2007 and 2017 versions of this agreement, because and that is kind of shown in the kind of ending of the sentence that says, I'll come back to this. Otherwise, the architect's services for modifying the construction documents shall be without additional compensation. So, and then in any event, the architect's modification of the construction documents shall be the limit of the architect's responsibility under the Article 6. So a really, really important paragraph, because it says that if the lowest bid comes higher than the budget and the owner decides to work with the architect and figure out how to reduce the scope or something, if this exceeding happened because of a reason that was out of architect's ability to anticipate, such as labor or some crazy jump in steel prices or something like that, if that's the case, then the architect will get compensated for revising the construction documents. But if that's not the case, if the architect simply design a building that's just too big or something, then the architect needs to go back and do the redesigning and whatever work they need to do to come within the budget without any additional compensation. So what I was trying to say earlier is that 2007 did not, I don't think it had this piece of information where it says that the architect will get paid if the exceeding happened because of something that architect was just simply unable to predict. It was out of their hand. Like in 2008, this agreement was just saying architect is not receiving any compensation if the lowest bid comes too high. And now here we have this added piece of information that probably, and I mean definitely, emerged here because there was a legal case where the architect was arguing to get paid because they felt like because they felt that the exceeding was something that they could not possibly predict. So yeah, that concludes Article 6. So yeah, it's an important article. There are a few things that are very important to understand and remember here. Okay, now moving on to Article 7, copyrights and licenses. The Architect 7.1. I guess before we dive into it, let's see how big it is, how long it is. It's not very long, so but it still contains more than a few valuable things that you will have to have a really good grasp on. So let's get into it. 7.1. The architect and the owner warrant that in transmitting instruments of service or any other information, the transmitting party is the copyright owner of such information or has permission from the copyright owner to transmit such information for its use in the project. So it says whoever is initiating the transmittal, whoever is sending stuff, actually has the copyright of that stuff, of the instruments of service. 7.2, the architect and the architect's consultants shall be deemed the authors and owners of their respective instruments of service, including the drawings and specifications, and shall retain all common law, statutory, and other reserved rights, including copyrights. Submission or distribution of instruments of service to meet official regulatory requirements or for similar purposes in connection with the project is not to be construed as publication or derogation of the reserved rights of the architect and architect's consultants. So it's a pretty important paragraph that says architect and the architect's consultants are owners and they have copyright of their work, and if they have to share it with somebody in the process, does not mean that they are giving them away. 7.3, the architect grants to the owner a non-exclusive license to use the architect's instruments of service solely and exclusively, very strong words, two of them, for purposes of constructing, using, maintaining, altering, and adding to the project, provided that the owner substantially performs its obligations under this agreement, including prompt payment of all sums due pursuant to Article 9 and Article 11. The architect shall obtain similar non-exclusive licenses from the architect's consultants consistent with this agreement. The license granted under this section permits the owner to authorize the contractor, subcontractors, subcontractors, and suppliers, as well as owners, consultants, and separate contractors to reproduce applicable portions of the instruments of service subject to any protocols established pursuant to section 1.3 solely and exclusively, again, two of those words, for use in performing services or construction for the project. So again, solely and exclusively for use in performing services or construction for the project. If the architect rightfully terminates this agreement for causes provided in section 9.4, the license granted in this section 7.3 shall terminate. 7.3.1. In the event the owner uses the instruments of service without retaining the authors of the instruments of service, the owner releases the architect and architect's consultants from all claims and causes of action arising from such uses. This means if the owner is silly enough to say, okay, your company designed this building, I really, really like it, and I'm going to replicate it in my other development in 100 miles away from this facility, and I'm just going to use the same design. But then, first of all, that is a breach of copyright. But what this paragraph here wants to say is that if there are some problems that emerge during the construction of that copycat project elsewhere, if there are problems during construction or after, or if the owner gets sued for something that is related to that copycat project, the original architect has nothing to do with it. The owner, to the extent permitted by law, further agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the architect and its consultants from all costs and expenses, including the cost of defense, related to claims and causes of action asserted by any third person or entity to the extent such costs and expenses arise from the owner's use of the instruments of service under this section 7.3.1. The terms of this section 7.3.1 shall not apply if the owner rightfully terminates this agreement for cause under section 9.4. And we'll get there later, how the termination happens. And I believe A201 also talks about what happens to the copyrights if either architect or owner decide to terminate the agreement. 7.4. Except for the licenses granted in this Article 7, no other license or right shall be deemed granted or implied under this agreement. The owner shall not assign, delegate, sublicense, pledge, or otherwise transfer any license granted herein to another party without the prior written agreement of the architect. Any unauthorized use of the instruments of service shall be at the owner's sole risk and without liability to the architect and the architect's consultants. And 7.5, except as otherwise stated in section 7.3, the provisions of this Article 7 shall survive the termination of this agreement. And that brings us to the end of Article 7. It's short, but it establishes how these copyrights and licenses work. And in a nutshell, this article specifically says that the architect is the boss of instruments of service, and even though the owner is paying the architect to do those instruments of service, the owner is not the owner of the project is not the owner of instruments of service. And if the owner uses those instruments of service as if the owner was actually the owner of the project was the owner of the instruments of service, then the architect is going to be indemnified and hold harmless in case something bad happens down the road with this copy project. So that's pretty much it. So our next article is going to be Article 8, claims and disputes. So we're going to be looking into what happens when things started going sour. So yeah, see you in a bit. Bye.